Hey everybody, it's the waitingfornextyear.com podcast. Do you recognize my voice? I'm Craig Lindell, and I haven't talked to you on this podcast in quite some time. Before I talk sports, I'm going to tell you a little bit about where I've been and what I've been up to. Let me start at the end. I had neck surgery. I had a disc replaced in my neck on October 14th. Which was kind of the culmination of a long period of time where I was battling an injury and numbness in my arm and shoulder pain. And to be quite frank, I didn't feel like doing this podcast. I stopped short of using words like depression and anxiety because it wasn't generalized. I knew exactly what I was going through. It was a physical issue. And, I think everybody battles a little bit of depression and anxiety from time to time. Mine was directly related to a physical injury. And without getting too much into the weeds, I just didn't feel like talking sports. I didn't feel like doing this podcast. It was never a good time to schedule up even one of my friends, let alone another type of guest, on Skype in the evening in my free time when I couldn't focus on it. I just couldn't. I was thinking about the fact that I haven't been able to run since July. My neck and shoulder have been in pretty consistent pain since then as well. I was trying to coach my kids and travel soccer. I'm trying to live a normal life. And a normal life for me is working out every day and playing with my kids and doing all these things. And it felt like 35-40% of my life was taken away by this neck injury. So that's the bad news. And that's the reason why I've been gone so long. But the good news is that I had a successful neck surgery. My neck feels better. I'm another couple weeks away from probably being cleared to start running. And just mentally, despite what's going on with my sports teams, I'm in a better place. I'm just in a better place. I miss doing the podcast. I had lunch with somebody you guys know from this podcast, OK Pants, yesterday. And for the first time in a long time, as I was talking to him, and I'm fine just having regular unrecorded conversations with friends, but I really did miss the podcast. And when you start to miss something, that's probably when you should start picking it up and doing it again. So I've had good intentions off and on over the last 5-6 months about picking up and starting the podcast again, and it hasn't happened. I even had loose plans to sit down with Ben Axelrod sometime in the last 3 months, and we had one scheduling conflict and I never got back to him to reschedule. I've been flaky about it. So I am excited to hit the reset button. I'm excited to get back on here and talk about some sports, but I felt like after you disappear for 5 or 6 months, you probably owe everybody a bit of an explanation. So that's my story. That's where I've been. And I really, I do want to talk to Andrew from Waiting for Next Year, and I want to talk to Nam, even though he's too busy to do it all the time. I'm ready to get back here and talk sports. I've even had some ideas about doing some longer range stories with multiple episodes. We'll see if that kind of thing comes to fruition. Those things are hard to pull off. They take a lot of time, but that's where my head is. That's the way I'm feeling, and I'm ready to get back. In the meantime, let's talk about the Cleveland Browns and Freddie Kitchens. Okay? Freddie Kitchens is embattled by this point. I think it's safe to say he has officially entered territory where he is embattled. And that's not an unfamiliar position for the Cleveland Browns and Browns fans to have a first-year head coach who's embattled, because it's not unlike the Cleveland Browns to bring in a first-year head coach and let him call his own plays and place a bunch of pressure on him. How many times are the Browns going to do that? How many times are they going to allow a first-year head coach to call his own plays? I don't hear anybody saying he should call his own plays. That's how he got the job. People don't really say that so much anymore. Now people wish that they had minimized the risk of Freddie Kitchens and his current predicament. But this is where we are. This is where the Browns are. They've underperformed. The schedule was hard. I think people have come to realize just how hard the early season schedule was. But the Browns they needed to win one or two more games. The only impressive win the Browns have all season is probably the Baltimore win, maybe the win against Buffalo. But in terms of impressive wins, that's it. They didn't pull out the victory against the Rams. They lost to the Broncos. They just didn't. They got embarrassed by the Titans. They didn't beat the Seahawks. The Browns needed one more early season win, and what would it have done to the conversation? Instead, the Browns got blown out of the building by the Titans. They didn't win any of the close games, and the Baltimore win wasn't enough to carry them. It just wasn't enough to carry the day and make people feel good about this team. And so here they sit now in the easy part of the schedule, the quote-unquote easy part of the schedule, and they falter against Duck Hodges, albeit on the road against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And just, it's not just the losses. If you wear blinders and look at the wins and losses, they split with the Steelers. Okay, I understand. But no, the Steelers are missing half their team. The Browns got into a fist-fighting, helmet-swinging brawl with the Steelers in the first game. So every bit of added context that the Browns have given us this year has led to making the season more miserable. It's not just that they lost to the Titans. It's that they got blown out, looked unprepared, committed a billion penalties, and embarrassed us. It's not that they split with the Steelers. It's that they beat the Steelers, embarrassed themselves in the last 8 seconds of the game. The coach wore a t-shirt, and every bit of context has gone to make this season less fun than it otherwise should have been. The Ravens have gone and ruined the Browns' first win because they've been good. And Lamar Jackson has been an MVP candidate. And so that's not the Browns' fault. They went and they beat the Ravens. They did what they needed to do, but even that is, I feel like you're walking to our own funeral in the second matchup with the Ravens in the second half of the season. But it just, nothing about this season has been fun. The Browns went on a mini win streak. They beat the Steelers, but even a win against the Steelers was ruined and made to feel like a loss because they lost Myles Garrett for the rest of the season. So, every season takes on a life of its own, takes on a personality of its own. And this one for the Browns has been really, really not fun. Just not fun. It's not just the losing, it's how they've lost. It's not just the storylines, it's how the season's played out. If the Browns had won the same amount of games, but they won their games in convincing fashion and Odell Beckham Jr. was going off 3 or 4 different times, it would feel like there was something to build off of. There would be something that was really fun, something that we could look forward to for next year. I've said consistently since the beginning of the season that this is more likely, it was not likely to be the season that the Browns went to the Super Bowl, let alone the playoffs. This was like the season before the season. This is the setup. The rookie head coach, the second-year quarterback starting a full season for the first time. This is the season before the season. This was the one that was supposed to set up the run next year and the year after. And when they went out and traded for Odell Beckham Jr., it changed the narrative. And all of a sudden it felt much more important for this to be one of the seasons of contention. And they just haven't been able to do anything this season that feels like it's part of that building block towards next season. Everything feels like a failure. And I'm not sure that that's totally fair in all respects, but that's just how it feels. I don't think anybody out there listening can argue that this has been pretty unfun as far as Brown seasons go. And they've already won more games than they did in either of the two seasons with Hugh Jackson, the first two seasons with Hugh Jackson. And on paper, you would have said, all right, well, coming off 1 win, 0 wins, a season where the Browns win 5 games, 6 games, 5 games with a chance to go 9, maybe 8 wins, you would think like, 8-8, 7-9 even, that'd be a building block. That's not bad. But the way it's played out, it has felt really, really bad. Really bad. So now the Browns are looking at their first-year head coach and wondering if the missing ingredient for him is time. Can they get better? Will they get better? Can you bet on them getting better? And I'm hard-pressed to believe that the Browns aren't using back channels to see if they can identify a more exciting candidate to take over for Freddie Kitchens next year. That's not to say I think he should be fired. I have no idea. I'm not in that building. I have no idea. I think some of the on-field decisions that Freddie Kitchens have made have been really dumb. I think he's looked in over his head for the majority of the season. I think on the bright side, they have cleaned up some of the penalties. I do think they've looked kind of prepared out of the gate, but the second half adjustments have been miserable. Some of the decision-making has been bad. I don't want to go crazy about the whole T-shirt thing because the T-shirt thing's not a big deal. It's emblematic. But only the people inside Berea, only John Dorsey and the Haslams and Elliot Wolf and I can't remember everybody else's name. Only those people are close enough to the situation to know if the T-shirt is emblematic of something real or just a dumb blip on the radar. From the outside, it seems like it might be emblematic of really poor decision-making and somebody who's not aware or prepared to have this position. From the outside, that's what it looks like. There's only one way to know, and even the people on the inside might have a hard time telling. But if they come out at the end of the season and they say, we didn't see enough progress, we didn't see a team headed in the right direction, are you really going to have a tough time arguing? Has Freddie Kitchens done anything in this season that we can see on a week-to-week basis that makes you feel like he's earned a second season? We all want continuity. We all know that firing a coach after one season is bad practice, generically speaking. But is there any evidence that you can say that you've seen other than your generic feelings about continuity that says that Freddie Kitchens should be back for another year? I can't say that I've seen anything. And it's tough. It's a tough thing to talk about because I like Freddie Kitchens. Even when I find him to be a little bit defensive in press conferences, I find him to be likable. I think he can sometimes go at some of the beat reporters. But even this week, he took issue with one of the questions that Darryl Ryder said, and he had a little bit of a back and forth, but he never seems to feel like the kind of guy who holds a grudge to a toxic degree. Pat Shurmur felt like he was holding grudges to a toxic degree, calling on-air radio hosts during breaks to defend himself. The level of rabbit ears that an NFL head coach just can't have. I don't feel that same thing with Freddie Kitchens. At the same time, he can't, because of his path to the head coaching position from running backs coach to interim offensive coordinator to being named head coach all in the span of less than a year, there's questions about qualification. And if they messed up qualification from the get-go, it's reasonable to wonder whether he is capable of ever doing this job and whether he needs to be replaced after just one season. That's the position the Browns put themselves in when they elevated the guy who started last season as a running backs coach. And that's not to trash Freddie Kitchens. I told you I like him. I do. But he's looked over his head. He's looked incapable. He's looked like a guy who had no experience. And I'm not capable of sitting here and telling you that more time is what's going to change that situation from him looking over his head to being the right head coach for this football team in the long run. And if the Browns feel like time is not going to heal that, they need to make a move and they need to change him out after 1 year, as much as that stinks for the generic concept of continuity and not flipping out a head coach after 1 year. None of us want to do that. Nobody wants to do that. In an ideal situation. In an ideal situation, you hire Mike Tomlin, and yeah, he's not perfect, but he's a leader. You can put coordinators in and out around him, and he lasts 10 years. And you can occasionally have a really unlucky season with tons and tons of injuries where you beat your rival at home with a third-string quarterback named Duck Hodges. You know, that's the kind of thing. Right now, the Browns have a head coach who has a team that, from a health perspective at least, had a far superior roster than the Steelers. And they found a way to lose that game. Some of it's inexperience of the young players. Baker Mayfield is still a young player. I know we anointed him. We gave him the throne, the king of the castle, but he's a young player. And so there should be growing pains, but to have growing pains at starting quarterback and head coach and on down the line, it's been really difficult, and it's made for a really unfun year. If this is in service of a playoff run next year, it'll all be worth it, and there'll be no problems. But as of right now, it's just hard to tell. Anyway, that's it for me. I wanted to thank you all for your patience. I want to thank the Dairy Brothers for picking me up during this last 6 months or whatever. I want to thank the Browns Friday Fumble guys, Dave and Dylan, and anybody else who's contributed to that show. I really, really appreciate you guys keeping the feed alive. Without you guys, it would have been just radio silence on this feed for the last 6 months. And I really, really appreciate all of you for helping keep this thing alive. I feel like the feed is something that I built. But as you guys know, as I've told you in the blogging and podcast game, there's no time to celebrate. It's not like writing a book. You're finished and you release it to the world and now you're an author. Blogging and podcasting, it's nothing if you don't keep it up. What have you done lately? What have you done for me lately? And without all those other guys, the Dairy Brothers and the Browns Friday Fumble, this thing that I helped build, the thing that I think I laid all the foundation for, would have been dead completely. So appreciate you all. Here's to a 2020 with the return of my contributions to this channel. Thanks again. Talk to you soon. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. I missed Thanksgiving, so happy Thanksgiving. Hope you still have some leftovers. Talk to you soon. It's been the waitingfornextyear.com podcast.